In this video, you're finally going to take a deeper dive into JSX. We're going to look at how we can create much more complex JSX expressions with multiple elements, nested elements, and dynamic data. So instead of having static text in here, we're going to be able to put whatever we want in there. Maybe it comes from user input. Maybe it comes from the database. Regardless of where it comes from, we want to figure out how we can make dynamic templates. Now, first things first, make sure you do have editor support for JSX. Here you can see I have a little syntax highlighting. This is provided by default by Visual Studio Code. But if you are using Visual Studio Code, there is a single extension I recommend you also install. If you go over to the extensions panel, it's this guy right here, Babel ES6 ES7. This is going to add better editor support for those features we'll be using throughout the course. I do have a few other plugins. None of them are essential. We'll be talking about some of them later. If you are interested, go ahead and install Path IntelliSense. This adds nice auto completion features, but the other ones can be ignored for now. If you're using an editor other than Visual Studio Code and you do not have syntax highlighting here, I recommend Googling your editor name followed by JSX syntax highlighting. So if I'm using Atom, I would Google Atom JSX syntax highlighting, and that should get you to the right page where you can find the plugin or package you need to install to add support for this. In Visual Studio Code, you should see that your file language is now JavaScript, in parentheses, Babel. That's going to ensure that all of those ES6 and ES7 features are correctly highlighted. So once you do have the editor set up, we're ready to actually create a more complex expression. And let's just start off with adding another element. So currently we have a single H1. Let's say, for example, we also want to add a paragraph tag down below with a little more information about our app. How do we do that? Well, we're just going to tack on a p tag right here. After we open and close H1, we are going to open and close a paragraph tag, and we can type some text. This is some info. Now, if we go ahead and save this, the Babel compiler is going to rerun and live server is going to refresh the browser, but we're going to notice that we actually are getting nothing showing up to the screen. That is because we have ran into our very first Babel error. So we can view this by heading over to the terminal. And when we do, we can see that the change was correctly detected, but when it tried to compile our code down to ES5, it completely failed, and it's showing us exactly what went wrong and where it went wrong. So right here we have our syntax error, and it's coming from the file we just saved, app.js, in the source folder. Here's the error itself. Adjacent JSX elements must be wrapped in an enclosing tag, and it's pointing towards that line where we create our JSX. So this is our first important lesson. When working with JSX, you can only have a single root element. Currently, we have two. We have an H1 and a paragraph tag sitting side by side. Now, obviously, we do want to have an H1 and a paragraph tag sitting side by side. We just need a single root element. So we can actually wrap all of this inside of a div that's going to remove the error, and it's going to allow things to correctly render. So let's do that. Right here, before our opening H1 tag, I'm going to open a div tag. And back here, after we close the paragraph, we're going to close that div. So now our two elements, H1 and P, they're wrapped in a div, and this is completely valid JSX. If I save app.js right here, we can see that the change was detected. There is no error printing below, which is fantastic. And if we head over into the browser, we get exactly what we wanted. We have our H1 tag with the correct text, and down below we have our paragraph tag showing up as well. So when we are creating JSX expressions, we can get really complex. We can include a ton of information and nested elements, but we just need to have a single root. So for almost all of the JSX expressions we're going to be creating in this course, we're going to have a single root div, and we'll be calling this the wrapper div because it wraps everything else. It's perfectly valid to have side-by-side elements like this as long as they're not at the very root of your expression. This is completely valid JSX, but if we were to add any more elements or any more text or any more complexity, it would easily run off the side of the screen, and that's not what we want. We want everything to be formatted a little bit nicer so it's a little easier on the eyes. Now we can actually kick things off by just moving things onto their own line. So for example, I can hit enter right here before the H1 opening tag, move that onto its own line. I can also do the same thing for the paragraph tag, and finally the closing div tag, and this is perfectly valid. If I go ahead and save app.js, everything still works as expected. Babel understands this. Now I'd like those divs to line up, so I can actually hit enter right here and indent everything. I can indent everything. This is going to allow everything to line up in a way that looks a little easier on the eyes. And if I save app.js, once again, things are going to refresh. This is perfectly valid. There are no errors. Now, this is what I want. I want those div tags to line up, but I find that this looks a little bit weird. It's a little weird to have the template variable set equal to followed by nothing. So what I like to do for clarity's sake only is add an opening parenthesis right here, removing the auto-completed closed parenthesis. And then I add the closed parenthesis down below after my JSX expression, and I move that onto its own line. And this is the format I personally find the easiest to read. Now, I didn't invent this formatting style. If you look at the source code for other React projects, you're going to see a setup very similar to this with those wrapping parentheses, the root tags lined up, and all of the other content nested inside. And we don't have to stop here. We could add more complexity to this if we needed to, which we'll be doing extensively throughout the rest of the course. So for example, I could add an ordered list, a numbered list of items. I could open the OL tag and close it, and I can put some individual list items inside. Right here, let's add one, item 1. We can then close that LI and we can add a second guy down below, opening the list item tag, giving it some text, and then closing the list item tag. If we save app.js, Babel understands this. It is going to compile this down to ES5, and right here, we get the expected output showing up. Now we know that this gets converted into those create element calls, but what happens when we have a complex nested structure like this? Well, we can actually look at app.js to see exactly what's going on. If we crack that open, we can see we just have nested react.createElement calls. So the div has the h1 and the p and the ol, and the ol has two of its own. It has one for each list item. And this is a great reason why you don't write your templates in react.createElement calls. This is basically impossible to read and update. I never want to see this ever again. So let's go ahead and close that file and forget it exists. We're going to be working with JSX instead. And for the very first time in this course, it is challenge time. If you've taken one of my courses before, you know all about challenges. If you haven't, challenges are where I give you a little assignment. I ask you to write some code, make some modifications to the app, and then you go off and you do that. You come back and you watch me go through that same process. So for example, I might say, hey, your challenge is to change this text over to your first name. Take a moment to pause the video, go ahead and make that change, test your work by saving the file, and when you're done, click play. So I'd give you a moment to pause the video, you would pause it, you would make the change, save the file, confirm that the change worked, then you'd click play and you'd watch me go through that process. Now, obviously that's not a real challenge, way too simple, but don't worry. The challenges are going to be outlined for you. I'll tell you exactly what you need to do, and they're also only going to use information you've already learned in the course, so you'll have no problem completing them. And you're allowed to use the stuff we already wrote together. That's the whole point of the challenges. It's to take this stuff and put it into practice on your own. Real talk for a moment. If you skip the challenges, you are just wasting your own time. You're going to waste your time watching this course. You're going to get to the end. The videos will be over. I'll be gone. You'll try to make your own React app and you won't be able to because the information isn't going to stick unless you actually take the challenges seriously. The challenges are designed to get you writing your own code, making your own bugs, fixing those, and eventually getting the satisfaction of having actually built something on your own. Now, I don't ask for perfection. There's going to be challenges you go through and you just can't get it done. You're getting an error. You're getting frustrated. That's okay. That's why I go through the process afterwards. I show you exactly how to get it done and I give you my thought process around that. So I don't ask for perfection. I just ask that you take all of the challenges seriously and you actually try to go through them, whether or not you complete them successfully. Now we're going to start off easy. We only know a few things, so we can really only do a few things. But as we learn more about React and the ecosystem, the challenges are going to get a bit more open-ended and a bit more complex. But for now, things are going to be a little more targeted and a little easier to get done. So I'm going to outline what I'd like you to do in comments right here. You do not have to write these comments. They're just there as notes. So when you pause the video and you go through the process, you can always look back at the paused video. You can see my little outline, and that'll just give you some direction as to what I wanted you to do. The goal here is to create your own template like we have here, and you're going to render the new template as opposed to rendering the one we built together. So step one is going to be to make a new variable. You're going to create a template to variable, and this is going to be a JSX expression. Now this JSX expression is obviously going to have some elements inside of it. So I'm going to give you a quick outline as to what elements I want you to create and what text they should show to the screen. So right here, what are we going to have? We're going to have our root div first of all, because we need a root element if we're going to have other elements side by side. Inside of that div, next up, we're going to start off with an h1 tag. And this h1 tag is going to have the following text value, your name. So in my case, I would have the text Andrew Mead showing up in the h1, much like we have the text Indecision app showing up in the h1 here. Then we're going to create a few more elements alongside this h1. Next up, I want you to make a p tag. And inside of this paragraph tag, you're going to go ahead and add age :space followed by your age. In my case, I had typed 26. Then we can add another paragraph tag down below. This paragraph tag is going to be location: space, and you can just type out your location in whatever format you want. I'm just going to stick with my city name, Philadelphia. Now the last step is to render template to instead of template. So currently we're rendering the template variable. After you create your new template, template2, you want to go ahead and render that. Now everything you need to know in order to complete that is sitting right here. We create a variable, we define our elements, and we render it, and it's not cheating to refer back to that. I ask that you don't copy and paste it, I ask that you build it out on your own, but if you forget how something works, do feel free to refer to the things covered in the video. That's the whole point. So take some time. You're going to go through this. You're going to test your work in the browser when you're done. Make sure everything shows up correctly. If you're getting an error, try to work through that error. And when you are done, you can click play. So I'm going to add about 3 seconds of silence right now. This is so you have a moment to pause the video, and then we'll come back. All right, pause now. All right, how'd that one go? If you weren't able to get it done, don't get discouraged. It's our very first challenge, and the format can be a little jarring at first. Once we go through 1 or 2, you're going to get a really good idea as to how they flow. I use the same kind of setup for all of them, and you'll be a master in no time. So the first step was to create that template2 variable and set it equal to a JSX expression. So I'm going to do that right here. Var template2. I'm going to set it equal to a JSX expression, and we're going to use the same formatting techniques we used above. It's by no means required, but that is the standard we're going to be using. So I'm going to open and close my parentheses, hit enter, and right here, this is where we're going to define our actual JSX. Now I wanted you to start off with a root div, so we can start off with a root div, and inside of this root div, we're going to be adding 3 other elements, an h1, a p, and another p tag. So I will break those out onto their own line so I can toss those nested elements inside. First up, it's that h1. Now the h1 tag should have a text value equal to your name. I'm going to use my name right here. First name, last name, either. Perfectly fine as long as you got your partial name in there. Next up is the paragraph tag down below. And for the paragraph tag, I wanted you to use age: space followed by your age. I'm going to put 26 in there, and then we're going to move on to the last paragraph tag, location. Right here, location, : space, in my case, Philadelphia, in your case, wherever you happen to live. So that brings us to this point in the challenge. We've completed everything I highlighted. The only thing left to do is render template2 instead of template, and I'm going to do that by referencing the template2 variable right here. Now that we've completed all of the code changes we think we need to complete, we can go ahead and test our work by saving the file. That's going to cause Babel to run, the browser to refresh, and it looks like everything did work as expected. Right here we have our h1 Andrew Mead, we have our paragraph age 26, and our other paragraph location Philadelphia. So hopefully you were able to complete that as expected. If you got stuck, perfectly fine. As we get more comfortable with the challenge format, you'll be a master in no time. In the next video, we're going to cover how we can inject dynamic data into our templates. And once again, there'll be another challenge requiring you to do that on your own. I'm very excited to get to it, so stay tuned. I'll see you soon.